It's pretty safe to say that I've made some absolutely horrendous filmmaking investments over the years. But at the same time, I've actually made some pretty good ones. For someone who's been making videos for about 15 years, there's certain pieces of gear that have literally lasted me like a year before it's out of date and you need to get a new one or a better one's come out or whatever the case is. But there's also been certain circumstances where I've bought a piece of filmmaking gear 15 years ago and I'm still using it as we speak in this video. So in this video, I want to break down my favourite investments or my best investments over the last 15 or so years of being a videographer, creator, filmmaker, YouTuber, whatever you want to call me these days, because I don't really know what I actually am. I just do all of this stuff. I do all of it, mate, because it's just good fun and I've enjoyed it. And I do everything from the tiniest little corporate videos when I was like 17, and sometimes I do big pieces for Sony, Mazda, whoever you want. So in this video, I want to break down the best filmmaking investments that I've ever made and also the worst filmmaking investments so that you guys can get an understanding as to what a good investment is in the filmmaking industry or the YouTube space, creator space, whatever you want. And hopefully you can not do what I've done and make some dreadful investments. So number one, cameras. Cameras are a dreadful investment on paper. You might spend $3,000 on a camera and then 2 years later, the next version's come out and it's much better, it's faster, better codecs, better resolution. Everything's better about that camera 2 years down the line. So once that new camera's come out, your camera's price has literally been slashed in half. So if you want to resell that camera and get the new one, you've just lost half of your investment on that camera that you purchased. And now you've likely got to probably pay a little bit more for the one that's better. So you're losing out on so much money, but at the same time, we need cameras. Like, you need a camera body to obviously make a video. So if you're actually making money out of your camera and actually shooting projects for clients, for YouTube, whatever it is, if you're making dough out of that camera, it's a good investment. And you can actually rent out your camera to whichever client you're shooting for. So every time that you get booked for a shoot, you can actually whack on the rent for your gear as well, if your client is obviously willing to pay for that extra rent of the gear. So over time, you can actually make and claw that money back that you've actually spent on your camera and maybe even make a little bit more. But on paper, statistically, camera bodies, dreadful investment. Next up, lenses. Lenses are probably one of the best investments that you could make in the filmmaking industry. At the end of the day, lenses haven't really evolved that much over like the last 50 years. Yeah, they might have got a bit sharper, less chromatic aberration, sharper edges, but at the end of the day, a lot of people still try to buy old vintage lenses that are like 50 years old. The main thing that's actually improved in lenses is essentially the autofocus and the actual electronic features inside the lens. So for me, for example, I don't mind investing in different types of glass that I'm actually going to use into the future, like for example, Sony glass, because obviously I'm going to be using that Sony glass for 5, 10, 15 years down the line. That glass is still going to be good as long as I look after it for, as I say, the next 10, 15 plus years, because the first ever lens I ever bought was the Canon 50mm 1.8, the Nifty 50. I bought that lens like 15 years ago and it's still absolutely fine, and I still use it on my Blackmagic and other EF mount cameras. So that lens was an incredible investment, and if you look after your lenses over time, you can adapt them to different cameras, different bodies. So for me, that's why I have absolutely no problem with investing in lenses, and they also have usually a pretty good resale value. So if you actually buy a lens, let's say you buy a lens for $2,000, about 5, 10 years down the line, that lens is actually still going to have some of its value left if you want to resell it, because they're always going to be useful if they're looked after. So lenses, great investment. Next up, editing laptops. Now, we all want the latest, greatest, fastest editing laptop, render speeds. You don't want to have to worry about any lag. You just want that buttery smooth timeline. And I feel like every time a new laptop comes out, it's super quick, and then all of a sudden it ain't that quick no more. And all of a sudden there's a new machine, new laptop out, and all of a sudden the laptop that you've just spent thousands of pounds on is no longer any good for the kind of files and the codecs that you're now using in your new cameras, or your laptop's just got slower. So editing laptops, dreadful investment. However, they're absolutely essential for what we do as filmmakers. You need to actually edit your piece on a laptop or on a PC or whatever you want to edit on. It's an essential investment, but on paper, horrendous filmmaking investment. Next up, and the best filmmaking investment I've ever made in my life, my tripod. Now, I've had my tripod for 15 years. I remember when I was like a little whippersnapper, 14 years old, I was desperate to have a tripod with a fluid head in it. That was like the gimbals of like 2012. This is the Velben D6000. They don't do it anymore, but this thing has literally stood the test of time. It's travelled the world with me. It's literally shooting this video as we speak. This thing has literally seen it all from when I first started out in my first ever passion projects, my first ever client project, all the way up to doing big like commercials. I still use it sometimes for interviews and stuff like that. And it literally has come on every single shoot that I've ever done pretty much since I was like 15. So that cost me about 130 quid, I think. So over 15 years, that 130 quid has gone so far, and it's probably going to go even further down the line. I'm probably going to have this for another 5-10 years because tripods haven't really improved over like the last 20 years. They've got lighter, a little bit stronger, the fluid heads are a bit smaller and lighter, but other than that, they're pretty much the exact same design, exact same technology. So tripods are the best investment that you could possibly make into your filmmaking equipment. Next up, one of the best investments I've made, I'd say in like the last 5 years, is a decent shotgun mic. Over time as a filmmaker, and as you've been in this game a little bit longer, you really understand the importance of quality audio. When you start out, all you're bothered about is the image, dynamic range, the colours, resolution, frame rates, all of that juicy stuff, but you overlook your audio. And for me, one of the best investments I've made is in my Sennheiser MKE 600 shotgun mic. And shotgun mics haven't really changed all that much over like the last 20 years. They're basically the same technology. They're basically just as good. They haven't made like this massive leap and bound, and they're not likely to do it again in like the next 5 or 10 years. So getting yourself a decent shotgun mic is going to be an incredible investment. And on the topic of audio, when I first started out, like I remember one of the hardest parts of what I'd done, especially like when I was doing weddings and little corporate bits here and there, was finding a decent platform with royalty-free stock music, visual assets, basically like a one-stop shop to get all of the visual, sound, audio assets that I could possibly need for my production, that wasn't too expensive, that actually had decent tracks that I wanted to use in my videos, and a lot of them. And that is where today's sponsor comes in, Artlist. Now, I'm sure all of you know of Artlist, the royalty-free music, visual assets, templates, the one-stop shop for all of your visual audio asset needs when it comes to being a content creator. Now, we all know any video wouldn't be right without all of them different assets, like the sound effects, like the incredible story motivated music. These are so important as a filmmaker or a content creator that when I first actually got my Artlist account, it really just like opened up all of these different possibilities for me when it comes to music and now visual assets. Like they've recently started doing the visual assets alongside the audio assets, which as an actual professional videographer, to have that massive library of assets that you can dip and dive into whenever you need them, whether it's an overlay, a great soundtrack like the one in this video. I remember before I had an Artlist subscription, it was just a nightmare to find a decent track that I could actually license that wasn't going to cost me an arm and a leg and then have to charge my client an arm and a leg as well. So Artlist has absolutely revolutionised my use of music, visual assets when it comes to any part of my content creation. I also recently shot a campaign for Artlist for a new template that is now up in the Artlist catalogue for you to go and download and use. So if you want to go and grab yourself an Artlist subscription, you can go and download that template that I actually worked on during the campaign, and they've got a ton of different subscriptions for any kind of creator, whether you're a solo shooter, a YouTuber, Instagrammer, content creator, professional videographer, or a big ass enterprise. So Artlist have got you covered. I'll leave a link in the first line of my description to give you 2 months free when you sign up for an Artlist subscription. Anyway, on to the next investment. Next up, a dreadful investment is lav mics. Now, there's so much tech that goes into the transmission of lav mics. They're getting smaller and smaller each year, better battery life, better connection, better range. And every single year, another company's competing with the other to come out with a better and better lav system. So for me, lav mics are absolutely essential for what I do when I'm on a shoot. A lot of my shoots, like a documentary, which I literally just shot one last week, lavs were absolutely essential for that shoot. But in terms of an investment, on paper, they ain't great because they are going to be losing their value every single time an upgraded version comes out. Next up, drones and gimbals. Now, I think you're probably going to know the answer to this one. Horrendous investment. Now, I absolutely love gimbals. I love drones. They're essential for what I do as a filmmaker. But at the end of the day, the technology in the drones and the gimbals is changing every single month, it feels like. Every new company's coming out of a new gimbal every bloody month. And don't get me wrong, the improvements are massive. If you look back to like 5 years ago, the kind of technology that we had with gimbals, if you remember like the first ever DJI Ronin with like the 2 handles, and the same goes with drones. We've got new cameras, new gimbals, new battery life. They're smaller, more compact. And obviously everyone's crashing their drones, including myself. So if you're gonna go and lump an absolute ton of money on a gimbal or a drone, just expect in a year's time, there's gonna be a new one and the value of your drone or your gimbal is gonna reduce massively. Next up, one of the best investments that I believe you can make as a filmmaker is into your grip gear. Now, grip gear is simply just hard pieces of equipment like clamps, like magic arms, light stands. These kind of things are literally going to hold the test of time. There isn't any technology in grip gear like cages, handles, clamps, whatever it is. These pieces of grip gear aren't going to get better in the next 5 or 10 years. Every piece of grip gear that you own and you buy, as long as you look after it, which is pretty hard to snap a light stand in half, the spigots, they're rock hard, you ain't going to break them. They are such good investments because I've had some of my light stands, my decent ones anyway, for coming up to 10 years. And for a 10-year investment on a light stand, which is something that I use in productions all the time, and it simply hasn't got worse, light stands haven't had any tech that's, like made them better over this time. And if you invest now in a set of really nice, good light stands, they are probably gonna last you. They might even outlive you. Things like clamps, magic arms, ball heads, cheese plates, these kind of things that don't have any internal electronics, any technology that can be improved next week, next year, they're going to be the bare bones of your equipment. No matter what camera you go to, no matter what set you're on, they are always going to be valuable and they're always going to be modular across different cameras, different systems. So a nice set of grip gear is going to be an incredible investment. Next up, and probably the weirdest, most quirkiest one of them all, for me anyway, are sound blankets. Now, sound blankets are essentially black, heavy blankets that essentially soak up any sound in your set. So whenever I go onto a set to do an interview, or even on my YouTube videos right now, I've actually got my sound blankets literally clipped up to the ceiling on little hooks, and they don't just work as sound dampening, they actually negatively fill the rest of the frame, and then I'm not getting any spill or any light pollution coming in to the frame that I'm actually shooting. And you're gonna be so surprised at how well these sound blankets work. So, you're hearing me right now with the sound blankets up, and this is how it sounds without those sound blankets on. My microphone is so I'm literally speaking directly into my microphone, so you can really tell that difference between when the sound blankets are on and when them sound blankets are off. Them sound blankets deaden out all of that sound. It's actually mad how well they deal with that reverb. And going back to my earlier point about how important your audio is, at the end of the day, if your visuals are pants, but your audio is nice, deep, good quality, people are still gonna watch and listen to your video. Because at the end of the day, most people go to YouTube or to platforms, interviews, whatever it is, they are listening to the content. They're not necessarily seeing how beautiful the frame is. And you can literally get them at like under $10 a piece. $10 of value is going to be so much better than spending an extra couple of £100 on a better mic. These sound blankets are like literally invaluable to me. Definitely one of the best investments that I've ever made. And finally, the best investment you can make as a filmmaker is into your social media presence. End of the day, it ain't 2015 anymore. You don't need a show reel. People are simply going to hire you based on your quality of work and how well connected that you are in the space on social media. And that presence is so worth building, because at the end of the day, I didn't actually want to start a YouTube channel because I was worried that my clients would look at it and think it's not professional because it's YouTube. But it actually worked in the opposite way round. Bigger and larger clients then found me through YouTube, and I got bigger and better projects come from YouTube than I ever could have imagined if I hadn't have been on the platform. So from my point of view, investing in your social media presence, whether that's Instagram for your videos or for your stills or whatever it is creative, or YouTube, mate. For me, my YouTube channel and my entire social presence has definitely been my best investment as a filmmaker. Over all these years of posting regularly on YouTube, posting my films, my content, my personality as well, because at the end of the day, people actually work with people. They don't just work with cameras, yeah? So if I get hired onto a shoot, people want to know that I'm actually going to be a nice geezer to work with. So that for me is a really big thing. When I'm like hiring another shooter, I want to know that that person's going to be respectful in front of the client and obviously going to be a great shooter, great assistant, whatever it is. Investing in your social media presence will be the best thing that you do as a filmmaker. Hopefully you lot won't make the dreadful filmmaking investments that I made when I first started my career. It definitely would have benefited me if I'd have actually taken this advice when I first started out and didn't just want the best cameras, best editing laptops, all of this stuff. They were never the right investments. They were never good quality filmmaking investments that are going to stand the test of time. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video and got a lot of benefit from it. I'll leave all the links in the description for every piece of gear that I've been speaking about in this video, and make some decent filmmaking investments, mate, otherwise you'll be broke like me. Bosh.